I'm Alice, a 35-year-old office worker, and my husband David, who is 33, has recently been transferred for work. We've been staying with my in-laws temporarily while we find a new place. What was supposed to be a short-term arrangement has become more complicated because David seems to be settling in here, while I'm eager to move out. My primary issue is the strained relationship I have with my in-laws, particularly with my mother-in-law, Susan. Her sarcasm, which was noticeable before our marriage, has intensified since we started living together. For instance, Susan frequently criticizes me about my shopping habits, such as when she scolded me for missing a supermarket sale, despite my work schedule preventing me from shopping during the day. She also makes hurtful comments about our lack of children, something that deeply bothers me. David and I have not undergone extensive medical testing to determine why we haven't had kids, and we cannot afford expensive infertility treatments. Susan's sarcasm was manageable when we lived separately, but living together has made her remarks relentless. My father-in-law, Mike, also adds to the stress with his dismissive attitude. He treats me as if I were elderly, despite being only 35. His comments about my age and appearance are frustrating and hurtful. David's job has become more demanding, with increased travel and weekend shifts, making it challenging for us to search for a new place. I voiced my concerns about being stuck with my in-laws indefinitely, but David has been preoccupied with work and hasn't addressed the issue. Recently, while unpacking David's bag after a business trip, I discovered a reservation for a hotel stay and theme park tickets, dated for the day David claimed to be on a work trip. This evidence suggested that David had lied about his whereabouts and had spent time at the theme park with someone else. While David hummed a theme park song in the bathroom, I was infuriated by the realization of his deceit. When David's phone rang, I answered it in my anger and heard a young woman's voice before the call ended abruptly. I suspected this woman might be his mistress. I then checked David's phone, which was unlocked by guessing his simple password. What I found confirmed my suspicions: explicit photos of David with another woman, taken during times he had claimed to be working. The phone also revealed a contact named Emily, further linking him to the affair. I discovered David's secret when I checked his phone and found a message from someone named Emily. The message read, "David, I love you. I can't wait to become your wife." Clearly, Emily was hoping to marry David, which indicated he had been unfaithful. As I grappled with this revelation, David emerged from the bathroom, casually drying his hair. I seized the opportunity to confront him. "Refreshed from what exactly? It looks like you've been enjoying yourself in more ways than one. Who is Emily?" I demanded. David's face went pale, confirming my suspicion that he had been lying about his business trips and spending time with another woman. "It's true. You've been deceiving me," I said, showing him the evidence on his phone. "You went through my phone? That's a breach of privacy," David protested. I found his complaint about privacy almost laughable given his betrayal. "If you didn't want this exposed, you should have protected your phone better," I told him. "We had a promise, no cheating, or it's an immediate divorce. I can't stay married to someone who seeks out other women. It's time for a divorce." To my surprise, David agreed with little resistance. "Yeah, I guess so," he said. His reaction was unexpected. I had anticipated a more forceful argument. Was he already prepared for this outcome? I decided to start preparing the divorce paperwork the following day. The next morning, as I dealt with the divorce details and ran errands, I felt a pang of sadness. When I returned late that night, David and my in-laws were waiting for me. Susan greeted me with sarcasm. "You're finally back. I was wondering where you disappeared to," she said. Since David was there, they must have been aware of his affair and the impending divorce. I expected at least an apology or some acknowledgement of the situation, but instead, Susan made a shocking remark. "It's about time. I'm relieved you're leaving. I didn't want to see your face any longer." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" Susan smiled smugly. "I've grown tired of seeing your face. Even though David finally returned, you've been an obstacle. I tried to drive you out with my nagging, but you just argued back, so I had to use my last resort." "What last resort?" I asked, puzzled. Susan's smile turned cunning. "You know David's girlfriend's name, right?" "Yes, Emily. I introduced David to Catherine, a charming 25-year-old daughter of a friend of mine. She's young enough to start a family with David." Stunned, I asked, "You orchestrated David's affair?" Susan dismissed my concern. "Oh, don't make it sound so dramatic. I merely facilitated an introduction." I was horrified. Susan's blatant admission of setting up her son to cheat was chilling. "David is our only child, and we need an heir," Susan continued. "If you had managed to have a child, I might have been more accepting, but you focused solely on your career and never had a baby." Mike, Susan's husband, nodded in agreement, confirming his awareness of her actions. A 35-year-old woman who can't have children is no longer needed. Now that you get it, you should leave. Susan pointed at me triumphantly. I replied calmly, I understand your perspective perfectly. I'll leave as you wish and take all my belongings with me. Susan offered to send someone to help, but I had already managed everything myself. No need, I said. I've already taken care of everything. Susan was surprised when she noticed I wasn't upset. Besides, I already knew you were helping David with his affair, I added. What do you think I was doing all day? If it had only been about preparing the divorce paperwork, it wouldn't have taken so long. I spent the day arranging the move and meeting with Emily. David's voice trembled. You met with Emily? Of course, I said. I had to confront her after discovering your betrayal. When I found her number on your phone, I called her. She was stunned to learn you had told her you were single. I made sure she knew the whole truth. David, Susan, and Mike were visibly shocked. Emily was devastated when she realized she had been unknowingly involved in an affair. Catherine was furious and even considered suing for marriage fraud. I promised to support Emily in any way I could. I've decided not to seek compensation from Emily, I said, but I will be increasing the compensation demanded from you, David, and from you too, Susan. Mike blurted out, compensation? Why should we have to pay? David is responsible for his actions, Mike added, but we are not involved. It seemed they had expected David to bear the full burden of compensation and had not anticipated being held accountable. There's no room for leniency in this situation, everyone is accountable. The emotional distress caused by your harassment alone justifies seeking compensation. I made this clear with a dismissive smile, which left Mike grumbling silently. I reminded him of my profession. I work at a law firm, and I would be consulting with Michael, our head attorney, to determine the appropriate compensation we could pursue. I had already contacted Michael earlier that day. Mike's reaction was one of disbelief. What, he stammered. Just then, we heard the sound of a car pulling up to the front gate. Ah, they're here, I said with a broad smile as I moved towards the door. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I apologize for the late request, I said to the movers. No problem at all. We had a slot open for tonight's service, and it worked out perfectly since I finished my errands late, replied one of the movers. Great. Please get started and be extra careful with the fragile items, I instructed as I welcomed them inside. The movers began packing up my belongings, including my clothes, books, computer, and appliances from the living room and kitchen. Wait a minute. Susan's voice interrupted as the movers worked efficiently. Hey, don't take that, those items belong to us, she protested. No, these are all mine, I asserted firmly. I brought them into the house when I moved in with David. The in-laws' house had outdated appliances, and as someone who loves gadgets, I couldn't tolerate that. So, I brought my own from my previous apartment. Susan has gotten used to them and mistakenly assumed they were hers. The robot vacuum, cordless cleaner, multifunction oven, IH cooking heater, negative ion hair dryer, and the espresso machine, they all belong to me. You're taking everything, how greedy! Susan shouted, trying to lunge at me. But David stepped in to stop her. Mom, it can't be helped. All those things belong to Alice, David said, clearly resigned to the situation. Susan wasn't ready to concede. Once you've experienced the convenience of modern appliances, it's hard to go back. If you're unhappy, you can always buy new ones. Though, after paying the compensation, I doubt you'll have the funds for such luxuries. As the movers continued loading my belongings onto the truck, I directed them to deliver everything to my new address. Follow me, I said. I watched as the moving truck pulled away before getting into my own car. Where's that truck going? David called out, his voice tinged with concern. To my apartment, of course, the one I owned before. For your transfer, I had it put up for sale with a real estate agent, but the price was set too high, and it never sold. I never lowered the price despite the agent's repeated suggestions. Who would have thought it would come to this? I fastened my seatbelt and chuckled. I might have been prepared for this, eh? David looked bewildered. I set the asking price higher than market value on purpose so it wouldn't sell, allowing me to return if necessary, I explained. David sank to his knees, overwhelmed by my revelation. You heartless woman, he muttered. Susan charged at me, shoving me aside. While I groaned in pain from the impact, she attempted to attack further by throwing a cutting board at me. Just then, a black figure darted into the fray, colliding with Susan and sending her sprawling to the ground with a startled cry. Thank you, Midnight, I said, gathering the stray cat Midnight into my arms. I quickly climbed into the moving truck and sped away from the chaos. I wasn't sure why Midnight appeared, but with his strong sense of justice, he must have come to my rescue. I promised to reward him with treats later. Following the incident, David and I finalized our divorce. My law firm filed for compensation from David and his parents. Michael, the head attorney, took on the case pro bono, using it as an opportunity to mentor the younger associates. Despite the young lawyers handling parts of the case, I felt reassured by Michael's experience and support. He also took on Emily's lawsuit, pursuing both criminal and civil charges with renewed enthusiasm since it had been a while since he handled a criminal case. After paying compensation to Emily and me, David's parents will likely have to sell their house, and it might still not cover everything. The thought of them facing a life of debt and poverty almost brings a smirk to my face. Now that I'm single, life without David and his deceitful parents feels like a breath of fresh air. For now, I'll revel in my carefree single life in my apartment, enjoying the company of Midnight, the stray cat I brought with me.